For long periods of human existence, people have foraged.
But with agriculture and global food production, we tend to opt for grocery aisles over hour-long foraging excursions in the forest.
And while there are some great, important, and arguably needed rewilding movements happening, which ask us to rethink our relationships to food, to the land, to community, and to each other, this episode asks, what are the benefits of foraging in our increasingly busy world? So today we ask the question, what benefits do you get with foraging, or what are the barriers to your participation? My name is Alyssa Overend, and I'm a food sociologist and avid food enthusiast looking to explore and bite into big questions about future food solutions and what they can mean for our personal, community, and social health.
And I'm Sheena Rossiter. I'm a journalist, podcaster, and filmmaker. And in my work, I look at urbanism. Together, we explore sustainable food solutions from the ground up. Welcome to The Ground Up, a podcast that looks at urban food solutions. This is episode 3, Foraging.
Foraging from our city's extensive river valley, or perhaps even your backyard or your neighbor's backyard, doesn't mean we'll get away from perusing the aisles of a grocery store anytime soon, especially in our ever-growing interdependence on international food systems and the convenience that comes with it. But for every bite of grocery-bought food that we take, we are taking a bite out of the planet. Is it possible, therefore, to get all our food from the wild, like our ancestors once did?
Hello, dear friends. Today is day 54 of my year of foraging for all of my food and medicine.
Well, in research for this episode, we did find one activist in particular, Robin Greenfield, who tried to live off foraging alone, where he only consumed food that he foraged in Wisconsin. Now, he did this experiment after he had already done this for a full year in Florida, but of course, you got great weather working for you down there. How did this translate into an area that is a little bit cooler? He was eating everything from wild rice, which is in abundance in the place where he was living, dandelions, and his main source of meat was actually deers that were hit by cars. And I'm not going to lie, it's better to be eaten than to have it wasted, am I right?
Definitely.
He even harvested his own water through a website called findaspring.com, and I checked it out, and there's actually one spring here in Edmonton in Gold Bar Park. He harvested food and then he stored it and dehydrated it. It was pretty painstaking work. One thing I should point out that he did mention in his videos and stuff is he lives pretty frugally, obviously. But more importantly is he is a single guy without kids. So this would be challenging to do in different circumstances for sure.
He was really interested to share this idea that wild foods are everywhere, perhaps more than we might imagine. He said it wasn't necessarily a challenge to find the food, but rather harvesting it, storing it was quite time-consuming. He also realized midway through this experiment that he wasn't getting enough fat. There's another rewilding expert that I follow who has a wonderful podcast called Rewild Yourself. It's by Daniel Vitalis. And he found that using bear fat was a good equivalent to olive oil. But again, this doesn't seem that accessible in many of our day-to-day or week-to-week lives. I mean, Sheena, how are your bear hunting skills these days?
I have to say I'm a little bit rusty. How about you?
I don't even have a gun license. I wouldn't know the first thing about going about doing that and all the knowledge required to harvest all of this, which is also what our activist found as well. I would say regardless of the extremists, some of the rewilding literature points to the fact that in our very capitalist neoliberal societies, that we all might find benefits in rewilding ourselves, even in small ways.
For many living in Canada today, buying cheaply produced food and pseudo-food items through global food production, which are widely and abundantly available in our grocery stores, has become the new norm, to the point where food wrapped in cellophane and plastic are more commonly consumed than a berry that's picked right from the bush. And while some may romanticize the idea of growing and picking our own fruits and vegetables, the reality is that very few people have the time, knowledge, and capacity to procure food this way. And these habits, well, they're hard to crack. There's also the stereotype of who forages. Is this just something that so-called nature enthusiasts do now? Simply put, how have we evolved as a society with our on-demand food deliveries at our fingertips from anywhere and everywhere, accessible with just a push of a button? We are far removed from finding our food in the wild. Now, we can't look at foraging and not speak about Indigenous peoples. Foraging is a deep-rooted cultural practice. It's central to identity, food security, health, and connection to the land, which typically involves harvesting diverse plants, fish, and game using knowledge that has been passed down through generations. Foraging for Indigenous peoples typically encompasses foods like berries, roots, spruce tips, game, and it's done alongside medicinal uses, with practices evolving to include modern-day tools while maintaining core values of respect, reciprocity, and the relationship with the environment. And these practices are vital for Indigenous peoples.
We had the honor of speaking with Cynthia Jim, a singer, a drummer, a mother, and a grandmother who's also an Indigenous knowledge keeper in Amiskwaciy-Waskahiagin. Though she grew up on the west coast of Vancouver, she has ties to this land as well. She had some beautiful words to share with us on berries and their traditional uses. We spoke with her about traditional foraging, berries, and the importance of land-based practices, not just for Indigenous peoples, but for all of us. The song you just heard is about women's empowerment. She tells us that the color of her drum matches the beautiful berries found in the wild. She pounds on the deer hide drum and sings a song that goes back generations. She doesn't know when it originated, but it is a song about berries. Listening to it did give us goosebumps. We'll let her explain more in her own words.
This song, you have to picture the woman that used to carry the baskets. They had wraps around their head, and the baskets were hanging off the back of their backs there. And this song is about the culprit of somebody stealing the berries. There's little critters going behind them, emptying their baskets and eating. And so the woman would be looking behind them real fast. And then they would notice, hey, my basket isn't getting full of berries. So they realized somebody was stealing their berries in their basket. So they would look back real quick to try and catch who was stealing their berries. So they sang this song. And then on the very last verse, they'd be singing, Hawesh mek makulula aklakum sha imakata ha'anina hi'ina ho'ona hi'ina ha'anina hi'ina. Then they turn around and catch the culprit. And that is resonant and symbolic of, sometimes we feel that our basket isn't full, and we feel it's something is stealing our, everything that is good for us from our basket. And then if we could just pay attention and become aware and catch them and stop it, it's like stopping generational trauma. It's making those decisions to stop all the negativity in your life, become aware, whether it's alcoholism, drug use, whether it's becoming a better parent. That's what this song symbolizes, stopping all that generational trauma, and then continue to sing your song at the end and keep singing it in balance. And that's what it is.
That's Cynthia again, who I first met in 2023 when I undertook a project on Saskatoon berry foraging in Edmonton, Orimiskwaciwâskahiyegan's extensive river valley system. Berries like Saskatoon berries, raspberries, blueberries are found all around Alberta if you have the eye to see them. As a food sociologist, I was interested in the foods growing in the wild and what they could teach us about connection, community, history, and health. Certainly those wildly grown berries are packed full of all kinds of great antioxidants and vitamins, and certainly more nutritious than a lot of the things we get in our grocery stores. In short, I learned a lot from the project and found that the foraging outings, while really slow and absolutely inefficient, were also quite soul-filling in ways that grocery store outings were not. But I think that was a big part of the point of the project. I'm going to let Cynthia speak to this in more detail. Here's a little bit more from our conversation with her.
First and foremost, I am a residential school survivor, disconnected from the land since I was 5 years old. But before and after residential school, our grandmothers came to live with us because they knew that we needed healing. And in that process of living with us, they brought us out on the land. They brought us to the creeks. They taught us how to connect with water, with earth, with fire, with spirit, with everything. And that's the first time that I realized that, what family, true family was. It wasn't just human beings. It was also every living thing that we encountered, every living thing that was in space with us. That's our relation.
Obviously, process or the effects of colonization and climate change that we're seeing, have those things or how have those affected your ability to practice foraging or berry picking?
The most recent experience with colonization is a highway that is being built on our traditional lands right now without our permission, without our consent or meaningful engagement. And what they actually did is they tore away the land like 3 meters from our sweat lodge, and also on the sacred grounds where we did our burnings for the spirit people. Even the water, the salmon, have become diseased and have depleted so gravely because of a commercialization of salmon. The berries are completely dissipating from all this stuff that they put onto the bushes around the highway to eliminate any growth of plant life or anything natural. A lot of things are being replaced by fruit trees that weren't traditionally from there, and a lot of our stinging nettle, our briars, our berry bushes, salmon berries, huckleberries have really depleted because the waterways are becoming polluted.
How important is that connection to the land? Because spiritually it's very important, but obviously you're seeing health impacts as well by having damaging, as you just described, to the land. Can you kind of elaborate on the importance of the land both spiritually and health-wise?
With the salmon, my mom started to go blind with the depletion of salmon. She's got macro degenerative disease. A lot of our people have become diabetic. A lot of our people have heart disease. Their imbalances, they have more inflammation in their bodies because they're not consuming enough natural berries and natural roots. Wild cherry trees are really instrumental. Wild willow, silver willow trees were instrumental in de-inflammation of the body. And not just that, the connection spiritually has, depleted with residential schools, 60 scoop, with colonization, with displacement from our traditional lands for the convenience of settlerism.
You touched on the role of your grandparents. Were they the ones that really taught you about land-based food practices, and what sorts of things did they teach you?
This is a real touchy subject for me because I actually witnessed the highways knocking down our silver willow trees, our wild rose bushes, our briars, our stinging nettles. And these are all teachings from our grandmothers and our grandaunts that came to live with us. They would take us out as we were little girls. 4 of us were born first, so us girls had the opportunity to spend time with them. Taught us about stinging nettle, about devil's club, about wild rose bush, about silver willow bark, about you name it. They taught us so much. And now that the highway just tore things, I took pictures of what it looked like before and after. They just piled all of these beautiful medicine plants like they were dead things on one pile and allowing them to die without even giving us notice to go and harvest them or to pull up the roots to transplant them somewhere.
Do you think enough is being done with reconciliation in order to maintain land-based practices?
Absolutely not. The whole system is built for us to fight for our own space, our own things that make us healthy. It's like a backwards system where they don't acknowledge us first and say, "Oh, what are we allowed to take out?" Instead, they'll do it, and then we have to sue them for taking our medicines after. It's a system that is set up for settlerism. It's not meant for Indigenous people, because Indigenous people, we're reciprocal. We believe that you don't just take from the land. You're always keeping in careful balance. You never take more than you need. And if you take more than you need, you're always taking some of the seeds to transplant them in an area that has become more healthy than the one that they destroyed. So that's the kind of thing that we're doing as a nation we're trying to revive through trying to access dollars so that we can create a system for our youth to transplant traditional wild seeds and put them in places where they will grow.
My name is Dustin Bajer, and I'm an educator, urban beekeeper, and advocate for embracing nature in the city.
That's Dustin. In addition to what he's just mentioned, he's also an urban farmer, writer, and eco-inspired cities builder. He tells us a bit more about how he got into this line of work.
So I grew up on an acreage right across from a forest, and so I spent any free time I had running around the forest. It seemed like a magical place. And I think when I moved to Edmonton to go to university, I missed that, and I found that a little bit in the River Valley. I found that, ironically, by getting into gardening, the very thing that my parents felt like they were making me do as a kid. But it just it sort of snowballed from there.
Now, Dustin is part of, among his many hats that he wears, urban foraging. This is foraging practice that applies to urban areas, and it's a movement that started to gain traction in post-industrial nations. It's typically more popular in tropical countries for obvious reasons. In places like Hong Kong and even Singapore, you can find tropical fruits naturally growing. Urban foraging may be a solution to reconnect to nature in the midst of our high-tech cities, to heal what one American journalist, Richard Louv, calls the nature deficit disorder. It's important to point out that Dustin is far from being the activist Robin Greenfield who has taken foraging to the extreme where he's foraging effectively everything. But as Dustin sees it, what he does is more of a public service to education on the topic.
Over the past decade, Dustin has worked on a variety of urban ecology projects. He co-designed school food forests, built Canada's first high school aquaponics system, and partnered with the city of Edmonton to create native food forests through their Root for Trees program, which we will speak to momentarily. Each project aims to reimagine what's possible when we design cities as ecotones. That is, spaces where biodiversity, sustainability, and human well-being thrive together.
It kind of occurred to me that we spend a lot of time beating back the natural world. So even thinking about a typical garden, you're always, you're trying to beat back weeds, or you're trying to keep out pests or animals that might come in and, forage on your fruits and vegetables. And then, that forest that I was running around in as a kid, it didn't have any of that. And it seemed like one of these systems was, complex and diverse. The other one was fairly, simple, needed a lot of work to kind of maintain it. And ecological design thinking really opened up my thinking around, like what happens if you stop beating back nature? What happens if you could invite it in? It's in a way, it's almost like water, like you can try to hold it back, but wouldn't it be better if we could redirect it? And, do all kinds of amazing things. And climate change is a really big issue at the moment. And so we know that there are solutions out there in the natural world. What if we actively embrace them? And at first it was like, yes, nature can do a lot of things for us, so we should embrace the natural world. But my thinking has evolved over time to this idea that like we can actually also benefit the natural world, that relationship doesn't go just one way. So embracing nature in urban environments, good for us, but also great for nature.
I wanted to ask a little bit about the nature walks that you lead, nature, I guess, in quotations. What edible foods are found in our river valley, and what are people's reactions in general when you've led these tours on just the availability of food that's kind of at many people's doorsteps?
I think if folks who come on walking tours are generally pretty pro foraging, yeah. But it's controversial in some circles. Like I know that, this kind of idea that, we should leave it to nature, leave it to the birds. And I think that there are some important ethical considerations around harvesting. The thing for me is I feel like foraging is a way of, like a very real way of having a touch point with the natural world. If you can use that as a conversation starter about embracing nature in the city, I think it becomes easier to have broader conversations about bringing some of these plants up into the landscape and into our parks and edible landscaping. And I think that's like ultimately where I'd like to go. And, I like to think that folks who forage have a strong connection to the natural world and are more likely to advocate for it. I mean, in terms of actual foods that you can find, there's all kinds of native plants like saskatoons and currants and gooseberries and beaked hazelnuts and high bush cranberries, pin cherries. I mean, you'll even find some apples on occasion. Everything I've mentioned so far is like a nut or a berry, but there's wild asparagus throughout, some of it probably just originating here, some of it the actual abandoned asparagus plots from market gardens that used to be in the river valley. We've got goji berries that were brought in or escaped cultivation that are throughout the river valley. And then there's all kinds of, the fungi thing has been something that I've dabbled in, but I'm not confident enough to like look at it and be like, yes, you should eat this. Mushrooms of Western Canada, really great book, has a dichotomous key. Highly recommend it. And then there's lots of stuff where, you can eat like the leaves and the roots. I generally don't do too much of harvesting any roots because I don't want to actually like physically remove a plant. The nice thing about like berries and nuts is that it's literally a part of the plant that the plant is saying, eat me, go forth and propagate, like on my behalf. And so, and they're often more recognizable than doing a lot of the, leaves and roots and that kind of stuff.
Dustin has a wealth of knowledge and passion about rewilding our cities and even imagining our cities not as separate from nature, but as nature. Speaking of culture, as we heard earlier with Cynthia Jim, food and foraging is strongly linked to many Indigenous cultural practices and their connections to the land. And for some settler populations that now call so-called Canada home, some of their traditional foods can also be found while foraging here locally.
Exhibition about local goji berry and the history of Chinese community in Edmonton.
Did you want to ask a question? Yeah.
That's Yongfei Guan. She completed her MFA at the University of Alberta, and the Goji Berry Tea House exhibit, which we had the pleasure of visiting, was part of her thesis.
So remember how earlier Dustin Bajer mentioned that goji berries can be found in the river valley? Well, Yongfei has a whole thesis to tell the stories of how they got here. In short, they came over with the early Chinese settlers.
The first Chinese, when they come in the 1890s, they settle in Hotel McDonald area to Canard Park, and there's lots of goji berry. Used to be lots and lots of goji berry there, and the Chinese community in the 60 and 70 used to, that is their social space. They go there to pick goji berry in the summer and fall around this time of the year, and they will buy their barbecue pork and barbecue meat and socialize in the Chinese restaurant and shopping in the area. And then they will go to the area that the Chinese elderly people used to call Goji Hill to pick goji berry. It's a regular family activity that the Chinese do in Chinatown area, especially the one that in Chinatown area.
Yang Fei explains how the Goji Berry Tea House project came about after researching her own Chinese heritage and the history of Chinatown here in Edmonton. The Tea House exhibit is located in the middle of Fort Edmonton Park, down in Edmonton's vast river valley system, which is a historical village that shares stories about Edmonton's past.
It's really starting with my community research about my heritage and my heritage, Chinatown. I realized the longer I stay here, I realized that Chinatown provide Chinese immigrant anchor point for our heritage, even though we don't live there, and it's not something I go about every day, but it's an anchor point where I learn about history, my culture, and also connected to my community. And that's when, in 2017, that emotional connection to my heritage suddenly become more and more intense as the gate is going to tear down. The Harbin Gate in Chinatown is going to be moved and abandoned.
In the exhibition, walking through Fort Edmonton's historical park, we are transported back in time to the late 1800s and early 1900s. Character actors dressed in Victorian-era clothing work the space, and Yang Fei's Goji Berry Tea House exhibit is housed in an old saloon-style building. Old Chinese-style cups and pots are placed throughout the space. With audio speakers nestled in some of the teapots, conversations recorded in Mandarin spill out and fill the air, bringing a sense of community to the space. This was all part of her aim to create a sense of Chinese community in the heart of Fort Edmonton Park, and the importance of sharing culture through food, as well as the centrality of goji berries to her culture.
A group of local artists invited me to go to Grandma's house in 2019 to collect some goji berry branches to memorialize the gate that is currently still abandoned. So I went to the Grandma's backyard. I see this freshly grown heritage plant that Grandma had been taking care of for 51 years old. I was mind-blowing. I was I never seen goji berry fresh before, even though I consume it in a regular basis. But in southern China, we don't commercially produce fresh goji. We buy goji from Ningxia, China, where it's more colder climate. So I was really surprised that it was able to grow so well in here. And I got really excited because I love food and this is my culture and this is something I really enjoy. And I was I learned so much already. And I feel like I need to continue learning that. I need to continue taking that journey from with my community, because they are the knowledge keeper. They are getting really old, and I feel like I feel like a sense of obligation to document it and research them with my community.
When we were going around with Yongfei, what kind of came to top of mind for me is how okra grows in the United States, since the seeds were transported on slave ships during the transatlantic slave trade. And it's just really interesting to see how foraging has evolved and how our habitats have changed with time, with history embedded in it, and the movement of people around the globe. You don't have to go far to find edible foods in our city. In fact, one program, Roots for Trees, is run by the city of Edmonton, where they plant a variety of edible trees in city neighborhoods. All the planting is done by volunteers, and it's helped expand the urban forest by planting raspberries, saskatoons, choke cherries, high bush cranberries, balsam, and poplars, often among other species. They've planted almost 375,000 trees and shrubs since the program started in 2013. And Root for Trees does a lot for the urban environment. It helps expand Edmonton's urban forest through tree, shrub, and wildflower plantings. It has become naturalized in areas, and it's helped reduce weed competition. Not to mention, it also helps protect local habitat and biodiversity, and it's a great program for locals. In fact, the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations said in 2010 that it's estimated that during the last century, about 75% of crop genetic diversity has been lost, a phenomenon that's called genetic erosion. So small acts that are being done by local activists and programs like Roots for Trees really help kind of prevent a little bit of this so-called genetic erosion. I'll let them introduce themselves and tell us about how the program started.
My name is Taylor Mayton, and I'm a landscape technician with naturalization with the City of Edmonton.
My name's Chad Mottershed, and I'm a program coordinator with the Root for Trees program with the City of Edmonton.
So Root for Trees is the City of Edmonton's volunteer tree planting initiative. So through this program, native trees and shrubs are planted for Edmontonians by Edmontonians with the goal to expand Edmonton's urban forest. The Root for Trees program is an important way for the city's efforts to build a climate resilient city. And we offer 3 primary ways for folks to volunteer with the program. So the first being our registered program. This is for groups of 10 to 60 to come out. This is facilitated by 2 of our staff. We provide all the shovels, gloves, and plant material for our volunteers. We also have a drop-in program. This is for individuals and smaller groups to come out and plant with us. And then we also have various special events throughout the season. The program has an annual target of 30,000 plants. And so far this season, we've planted 25,228.
We heard someone in an interview recently say that the best thing about community gardens is the creation of community. Can you speak a little bit to the community created through Root for Trees?
Sure, yeah. So our volunteers come from really diverse backgrounds, and we do our best to make the program equitable and accessible for everyone. For example, this year we introduced the drop-in program, which allows people just as individuals or as smaller groups to come out and plant with us and socialize. It really is a great way to meet new people who might be interested in the environment or just in serving their communities. And it's also fun to just be outside and be doing physical work. And we even, of course, meet volunteers during the events, and a lot of times we make really good connections. Lots of amazing volunteers come to plant with us.
Many of our groups use Root for Trees as opportunities for team building. So we get corporate groups, school groups that come out and plant with us. And tree planting is a great, task to do while visiting and chatting. So really great way to, get to know the folks around you while also contributing to the environment and serving your community.
Foraging can help various things in your life, be it both the health side of things where you're getting the wonderful benefits of berries that come from nature and that help you with the antioxidant properties that they have to offer. But more importantly, foraging, as we learned in this episode, really helps bring a community together by weaving in the historical past of a local area with helping preserve the nature in the present for future generations. Thanks so much for joining us on The Ground Up. This episode was edited by me, Sheena Rossiter, and Dr. Alyssa Overend co-wrote this episode alongside me, Sheena Rossiter. Funding for this podcast was provided by the Shirk Institutional Grant, and additional funding was provided by Ripen through the Level Up program. This episode was fact-checked by me, Sheena Rossiter, and Dr. Alyssa Overend. Special thanks to Knowledge Keeper Cynthia Jim, Dustin Bajer, Taylor Martin, Yongfei Guan, and Chad Mottershed, who were among our guests on today's episode. Original music for this podcast is composed by Kaylee Lambert. Additional music by Kevin MacLeod on YouTube. Logo design by Shelby Mandin. You heard sounds also from Robin Greenfield's official YouTube channel. Additional research for this episode was provided by the article Urban Foraging, Rethinking the Human Nature Connection in Cities by Melusine Martin at James Cook University, Australia, and Paris-Sorbonne University in France. It came from the academic journal eTropic, issue 17.1 in the 2018 edition, which was entitled Living Cities, Tropical Imaginaries. We also gathered information from the academic journal article Urban Foraging and the Relational Ecologies of Belonging. That was written by Melissa R. Poe from the Northwestern Sustainability Institute at the University of Washington, Joyce LeCompte from the University of Washington, Rebecca McLean from the Institute for Sustainable Solutions at Portland State University, and Patrick Hurley from the Department of Environmental Studies at Ursinus College. This was from the Social and Cultural Geography Academic Journal, Volume 15, Number 8 from 2014. The recording and editing for this project is done at the MacEwan Media Production Studio, part of the Department of Communication at MacEwan University. This episode was recorded and produced on Treaty 6 territory. We acknowledge that the land on which we gather in Treaty 6 territory is a traditional gathering place for many Indigenous people. We honor and respect the histories, languages, and ceremonies and cultures for First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people who call this territory home. Don't forget to subscribe to The Ground Up on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like what you heard, please leave us a review and rating. It really helps people find the podcast. Until next time, when we look at urban food solutions from the ground up.